this not knowing what we're doing, this getting it wrong, this having to apologize, this getting angry, all of it. What if your life is your practice? There is a quote from Ezra Beda. The point of practice is freedom. Freedom from the constraints of our views, our identities, our strategies. There is also another quote from Louise Hay that says the point of power is in the present moment. And when we pull these two quotes together, I think we have an elixir for life, an elixir for living. Maybe all of this is practice, not just when we're on the yoga mat or sitting on the meditation cushion. Maybe this really is the practice, this living, this humanness, this not knowing what we're doing, this getting it wrong, this having to apologize, this getting angry, all of it. How do we live as a practice? How do we do that? Well, from my point of view, I think it begins and ends with awareness. It's about cultivating a sense of awareness with enough compassion that we're not judging ourselves constantly. And in that field of awareness, we get to open up and be who we truly are. The not judging, the being curious, the wondering, who is this being that I am? How did I become the way I am? Who am I? Where did these viewpoints come from? And even down to our postural alignment, our habitual ways of being and moving, all of it tells a story. All of it is practice, and we simply need to open our awareness and see clearly. As humans, we often fall into that habit of something being right and something being wrong. Better, worse, yes, no, light, dark, duality. The poet Rumi wrote, "There is a field, I'll meet you there. Out beyond the right doing and the wrong doing, there is a field," and that's the awareness. That's that field of awareness that if we want to, if we intend to, if we wish to, we can cultivate. But like anything, it's a habit. We have to cultivate our attentiveness, tune in with awareness. And we have to continually remind ourselves not to judge, to be kind. In that field, we get to realize that we don't have to be so rigid and our tendencies don't have to be fixed. Sometimes I've heard people say, "Oh, it is just the way I am." And I feel like that's a bit of an excuse to stay that way. And in my own life, I try to cultivate a sense of openness so that I am able to change. I'm nimble, I'm mobile, I'm agile. I can tend to create who I am in any given moment. Do we have to be that rigid? Do we have to be that fixed? How do we change? So with the willingness to change and cultivate a tendency of open, wide awareness, we can begin to choose consciously how we're going to take our next step. We can soften our footfall, and change rarely happens when we're dragged along kicking and screaming. It happens much more easily when we're willing participants. How do we know when we're feeling stuck, misaligned? How do we know when we feel directionless? Well, sometimes the stuckness can feel like a depression, a sadness, an immobility. Where do I feel that? Where am I noticing that in my life, in my body, in my mind. Learning to recognize and name our feelings is powerful information, especially when it's done with a kindness towards ourselves. And maybe there's a moment right now where you could put your hand on your heart and feel what kindness feels like. Kindness, self-compassion, what does that feel like? What does it feel like when I'm being kind in my thought, my word, my deed toward myself? Most of what happens in life has a consequence, and those consequences, negative or positive, are learning. We get to learn from this life. We get to learn from the next awareness. Through all times, we learn patterns, ways of being, ways of protecting ourselves, ways of letting down our walls.
God, yeah, gorgeous.
Some of these patterns help us to survive and thrive, and some of these patterns don't need to be held any longer. We've moved through that time of our life. We can let go. We can choose differently. We get to make a free choice. It takes us back to that freedom that Ezra Beda speaks of, and that present moment that Louise Hay refers to, the power in this moment. In order to change, we need to feel safe enough to do so. Often when we feel unsafe, we tread back into old patterning, old ways of being that did serve us at a time. You probably know that feeling, I certainly do, of being in a similar situation and thinking, how did I get back here again? Just like that, falling into the hole, falling into the hole, falling into the hole, until you find a different road to go down. You just don't go down that road anymore. And how we get there and we go, how did I get back here? When we feel safe, we feel safe enough to move to a different street, a different shore, a different way of exploring, knowing that we are safe. We've also cultivated enough self-awareness that we know and trust and love ourselves. So how do I create safety? How do you create safety? It's creating new routines, new habits, new healthy patterns. We are creatures of habit and creatures of certainty, and our minds are little predicting machines. Most of us like routine. Most of us stay in these routines for a long, long, long time. Good habits may take effort. They may take persistence. But over time, those habits form stability. And stability forms safety. We know and trust ourselves. We know and trust our environment. We know we've got the goods. We know we can get through whatever comes at us. The deeper practice here is learning to sit with uncertainty, sit with ambiguity, sit in the middle of all of life, like you're in the middle of the center of a spinning wheel, because life is continually moving, knowing that the only way through is through. And the only way through is to sit with what is. Not knowing, not fixing, and not escaping. Just being right here, right now. Something interesting happens. We find our quiet center. We find the center of the wheel, the hub of the wheel. Everything around us can move. And we find ourselves in stable, centered ground. One practice that I highly recommend for helping us to feel safe is Yoga Nidra. Yoga Nidra is a practice of sleep yoga, and it requires us to be still and quiet and centered with our eyes closed or open for an extended period of time. Yoga Nidra, I believe, is a great training ground for cultivating centeredness in the middle of all of life. And you can do it at any time. In Yoga Nidra, we get to cultivate a sense of opposition, so heavy and light, cold and hot. We get to sit in the middle of the ambiguity, in the middle of all of those feelings and awarenesses, and we get to hold them both in equal measure, allowing both experiences without having to choose one. But in many ways, life is the real training ground. Every moment is an opportunity, should we choose to take it, to open our eyes and be with what is, our old beliefs, our patterns, our habits, our automatic responses. And this is where our awareness begins to attune, and we get to cultivate a softening. And so maybe that's the point. It's not a perfection. It's just opening our awareness, noticing who we are as we are, and being right in the middle of the practice, right in the middle of all of life. All of life today here is a little drizzly, a little rainy. And I don't mind it at all. Let me know how awareness works for you. Let me know what awareness has. Let me know what cultivating awareness has done in your life, how it's affected you, the people you live with, the way you work, the way you operate. Let me know in the comments. I'll be interested to hear. Alrighty. Thank you very much. I'm Amanda. I am signing off. I'm going to go and record a little practice now. A little practice of awareness, moving in yogic postures. And maybe you'll practice with me. See ya. Bye for now.